Reliable. Yeah. Okay, call the meeting to order. Welcome to this meeting of the Executive Committee of the Buckinghamshire Milton Keynes Fire Authority. The meeting is being recorded and will be uploaded to the YouTube channel after the meeting. For those that are on the Teams, if I could ask you to make sure that you stay off camera unless you want to speak. So first item of agenda, apologies for absence.
It's Councillor Lambert.
Councillor, I think we also got apologies for lateness from Councillor Darlington
That's
as well.
correct, yeah.
Thank you. Minutes of the last meeting. Any questions as to accuracy? We have to approve. Thank you. So we had three matters arising from the last meeting. First, the London Fire Brigade Culture Review and members to review the Code of Conduct. That's on the agenda today, item 6. We then had action related to the reserve strategy and the Director of Finance and Assets advised members it will be presented to a future Executive Authority meeting. Just, Mark, which meeting do you anticipate that going to?
Hopefully either June or July, depending on its exact authority.
Okay, thank you. And then the final action matter arising, sorry, that we had was review of the Buckinghamshire Fire and Rescue Service insurance to cover military and other staff working during industrial action, and it's been confirmed that they would have been covered under our insurance. So those were the three matters arising. Disclosure of interest. Members got any interest to disclose? So no. Thank you very much. Moves us to agenda item 5. Questions in accordance with Standing Order SOA 7. Have we received any?
None.
No. Thank you. Agenda item 6, Overview and Audit Committee recommendations. So we're moving now to the updated Code of Conduct. Councillor Hall to introduce.
Yes, thank you very much, Chairman. You've all seen the report on page 53 in your pack. It's the kind of item that's constantly being reviewed, it's constantly being looked at and constantly being updated. And I will hand over to Faye to give us a talk to it.
Thank you. Good morning, everybody. So as part of the review process of procedures, the Code of Conduct was updated and went through our internal formal consultation process through September to October in 2022. The document was presented to overview and audit on the 15th of March 23 and approved presentation to the Executive Committee today. A recommendation for adoption of the Services Code of Conduct for the following 3 years. Appendix 1, as detailed within your pack, is the proposed updated Code of Conduct. Feedback received through the informal consultation process, as highlighted in Appendix 2, has been considered and incorporated into the updated code where appropriate. Apart from accepted minor amendments, changes are shown as either additional text underlined and in red or deleted as struck through. As you will note, some amendments have been made, and these have included making reference to the core code of ethics for fire and rescue services in section 3. In section 8 on smoking, adding further information on smoking in vehicles and the exclusion of own personal time. In section 9, adding additional information on information security. In section 15 and the standards of dress and appearance, reference is made to being appropriately dressed for work, whether working in the office or at home. With regards to jewellery and adornments, the emphasis on health and safety rather than what is considered in keeping with the professional image, as this is something that can be interpreted differently. For hair, again, the focus is on health and safety rather than what the organisation deems appropriate. The section on tattoos has been reduced to focus on tattoos considered discriminatory, violent, profane or intimidating and therefore unacceptable, rather than visible tattoos being unacceptable. In section 22, unacceptable use of technology. Apart from some general updates, the section on social media has been updated to incorporate online platforms and the importance of being aware that out-of-hours activities can still be considered in the course of employment, and the inappropriate use of online and social media platforms and the sharing of material of an unprofessional nature in the course of employment amounting to willful misconduct. The section on cyberbullying has also been updated, with the examples provided being more relevant. Further to the normal internal consultation process, and being mindful that external scrutiny would be appreciated due to the allegations surrounding London Fire Brigade and other fire and rescue services. Further amendments have been made to the document, and this is following feedback from South East employers. These have included adding additional point of contact for reporting concerns other than the employee's line manager in section 5, In section 7, rather than referring to the local working population, it now states local residential population. In section 8, an additional paragraph has been added on fitness and the requirement for operational employees to undergo 6 monthly fitness assessments. An additional paragraph has also been added on the immediate suspension of work should an employee test positive for drugs and or alcohol misuse during the screening process. In section 15, the example of unsuitable business hire has been removed. And in section 16, in the definitions of a relationship and the requirement for declaring these colleagues has been added to the list. This is due to the potential risk for sexual harassment claims. The implementation of the Code of Conduct forms part of a wider culture review, and Anne Stanell will go through this in her agenda item later in this meeting. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Any questions, comments from members? That's Christian.
Thank you. No questions. Just Angela thought of the comment. Totally support obviously the changes that happened. They're sensible and straightforward. The internal consultation feedback is really interesting reading, and I think it wants a really good process in terms of suggestions back from our colleagues in terms of what the wording should be and what makes an appropriate culture, which feeds into the later agenda items. So yeah, make good reading.
Good, thank you. Any other questions, comments? Okay, on which basis? So thank you for the work on it. It's a huge amount of work, and love to observe the overview and audit committee discussion on it as well, which was thorough. We are being asked to firstly, recommendation 1, the Code of Conduct as detailed in Appendix 1 is approved for presentation at the Executive Committee for adoption. Secondly, the consultation feedback as detailed in Appendix 2 is noted. Members happy to agree?
Great.
Thank you very much. Moves us to item number 7, the Gender Pay Gap Report. Councillor Hall again.
Indeed. Thank you very much, Chairman. It was my show this morning. You've all obviously got the report. Again, this is something that is constantly being reviewed and monitored and updated. So I will hand over again to Babe.
Thank you. The Gender Pay Gap Report is presented today with a recommendation to the content of the report being noted and approved for submission to the government's website as per annual reporting requirements in March. As an organisation, the authority has a duty to carry out gender pay gap reporting and to publish 6 pieces of prescribed data about the pay and bonuses of male and female employees on an annual basis by the 30th of March. The snapshot date for public sector employees is the 31st of March each year, and the data presented within this report, as detailed in Appendix 1, is based on data as at the 31st of March 22. The gender pay gap shows the difference between the average earnings of males compared to females, irrespective of role or seniority. It examines the difference in the average pay gap expressed as the percentage of male earnings. It is important to note that the gender pay gap is not unlawful, and the presence of a gender pay gap does not mean the authority is discriminating against groups of individuals. Gender pay gap is a reflection of a workforce profile at a specific time, i.e. the snapshot date. In comparison, equal pay is a legal obligation and about unequal reward for male and females carrying out the same job, similar job, or work of equal value, as set out in the Equality Act 2010. Organisations can have a gender pay gap without breaching equal pay provisions, and the authority's gender pay gap is not as a result of any equal pay issues. This is the 6th year of undertaking a gender pay gap reporting, and for 2022, the gap has decreased by 0.4 percentage points to 13.4%. This is from 13.8% in 2021 and 6% in the first year of reporting in 2017. This is positive and takes the service 1.5 percentage points below the UK average pay gap of 14.9% for 2022. However, the median, which is the midpoint gender pay gap, has increased from 22 from 9% to 11.7%, and this is largely due to the highest paid employees being males. The mean and the medium gender pay gaps are 2 different ways of working out the average. The medium pay gap finds the females that earn more than half the other females and less than the other half, i.e. the midpoint, and compares this to males earning the same. The mean totals all female earnings and divides this by the number of females, then compares this to the same figure for males. The median gives a representative of a typical employee, and if the mean gap is bigger than the median, this shows that employees at the top of the organisation are males and paid considerably more than females. The extent to which females are represented within the lower paid roles is the main driving force behind the gender pay gap when compared to males who occupy more of the higher paid roles. The gender pay gap report has highlighted authority continues to have a gender pay gap. However, figures are not expected to reduce significantly within the short to medium term, as the issues driving gender pay gap requires a longer term commitment. The gender pay gap is generally caused by underrepresentation of female employees in higher paid roles. In order to lower the gap, attention must be paid to the recruitment, retention, development of females into these areas, and a range of strategies adopted to support that. A number of key areas of activities to lower gender pay gap has been identified as detailed within the action plan within the gender pay gap report. And whilst the foundations for improvement have been laid through these initiatives and progress is being made, it will take several years before there's any significant impact on gender parity within pay. The authority will continue to strive to increase gender diversity in all areas of the organisation and lower the gender pay gap. With regards to ethnicity pay gap reporting, this is something that the government has spoken about on a number of occasions, and mandatory reporting was going to be introduced in 2023. However, has not come to fruition. But however, some organisations are voluntarily publishing their ethnicity pay gap, and this is something we will look at reporting next year. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Any questions, comments from Councillor Darlington?
Thank you for the clear report and for the action plan. I think what worries me about what you've said is there's nothing that's going to be done for years. Will take years and years. And I guess what I'm trying to understand better is, do we understand the actions of the fire authority that may have contributed to the gap in the first place? And are we clear that the actions we've got in the action plan are actually going to resolve these issues? And finally, just to say, I would fully support us doing, also looking at our ethnicity gap as well for next year. That would be, I think, a significant step forward.
So with regards to the action plan, we have made efforts to improve the gender pay gap because having one employee, so one female leaving the organisation can significantly change the gap, and I think that shows that within this report it can really change the percentages. But certainly we're trying as much as we can to improve the gender pay, and as you can see from the action plan, there's a lot of initiatives have been put in place, improving our procedures, working on our flexible working. We're trying to increase that gender diversity as much as possible, and we will continue to do that.
Thank you. Chief Forester?
Just to say, just picking up on that point, I mean, when the previous head of HR and organisational development went, we reduced the size of the senior management team. So we didn't replace that position when she left, and that does have an effect on that. And that's just a practicality of a reduction of budget over the years, if I'm honest. I'm pleased that actually, in terms of the mean gender pay gap since 2017, it continues to go down. It's got better every year, which is positive. But the longer term is a point well made.
That's Dot.
So given the gender segregation that we have in roles in the fire authority, and it's not a formal segregation, I get, but given that we tend to have men in certain roles and women in other roles, I understand why the broad brush of numbers would reflect this kind of thing. I guess what I would like some reassurance in is when we compare like for like people within the same role, that we are not seeing a gender pay gap in that. So for example, if men and female are performing exactly the same role, they are getting paid exactly the same.
So that's equal pay.
That's equal pay.
Certainly do not have any equal pay issues.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
We had an equal pay audit last year.
2020, that's something again we want to look at to do in this next financial year.
And does that include considering women taking time off for work and therefore not getting the years in there?
The equal pay reporting might not go to that level of detail, to be honest.
Yeah, and I think that's where we start to see these big disparities, including in recruitment, retention, and also in terms of promotion, right? So women taking maternity leave and men not taking their paternity leave leads to different levels of years of service, doesn't it? And then therefore so that's something that maybe we could look at and how that's calculated in terms of pay.
It's just on our pay scales. Sorry, our pay scales are not incremental on years served.
Okay,
So we have two rates of pay, which is development and competence, so that shouldn't affect it. So there isn't a process in that should affect that.
thank you. That's
Thank
really
you,
helpful.
Councillor Hopkins.
Yeah, I just going to, looking possibly in broader data around the service as a whole across the UK, how we're comparing with other elements of the service, other emergency services as well. I think would provide an interesting statistic and an interesting comparison for work, and also initiatives that have been, and I'm sure you do this, initiatives that have been undertaken both in the UK within the service, but maybe internationally. Just to see whether there's some good ideas. I'm all in favour. If there's someone got a good idea, then we'll nick it and we'll implement it ourselves. So I wonder if that could be sort of rolled in. I suspect you're doing all of this, and you spend every day looking at how Spanish fire services are integrated. But just something just to give us a broader brush perspective.
Great, Councillor Christensen.
Yes, just on the mean bonus on page 65. I think we might just have touched on it in terms of the number of women represented in certain roles. But would you be able just to expand a little bit, because the pay gap swings quite widely both ways. I just want to like to understand the dynamics behind that a bit better. Sorry, Courtney.
Wasn't that due to the 6 long-term service awards?
It's quite often the bonus gap is influenced by long service award, which is it's a set amount paid for those individuals that achieve 25 years service.
Okay.
It's on page 66.
Yeah, so it's
That's why it wasn't.
Yeah, it's just I was wondering whether it's just the small number of data points, for example, or whatever. Thank you.
Great, thank you. If I encourage people to let me know when they want to speak, that'd be great. I'll try and retain a degree of order
Just
through the.
demonstrating that I went.
No, it's very good. I'll try and retain a degree of order as we go through. Just a couple of observations to me. So I think Councillor Darlington's point about us understanding actions that we take at the authority and the impact they have is a well-made one. And it strikes me that the equality impact assessment process is the best vehicle for us to do that. So I don't know whether it's worth just reflecting on whether it is through the that element of the IQIA, or whether we put a separate likely impact upon gender pay reporting into the equality impact assessment as a separate element, because I think it's a good thing for us to do. And just to add, I think I said at the previous fire authority meeting, I'm very, very supportive of us looking at race disparity in pay as well. So please do look at how we can bring that forward. I suppose the other thing, 2 things that struck me as I was going through the action plan, which is I think very thorough. We're going to have a conversation in a minute about culture, and it feels to me like we've got huge amounts going on across all of our people agenda, and we're coming at it very much in response to specific issues. It feels to me like we need to look at it through the prism of this is the overall set of actions that we're taking, and these are the areas we think it will impact upon our agenda. So ED&I, gender pay reporting, culture, and so and I don't think it's about doing more work. I think it's about a presentational point. I think the authority would find it helpful just to understand across the entire set of actions what we think we're doing and how it's impacting across those cross-cutting themes, if that makes sense. Because otherwise we end up looking at the plans in isolation. But I know some of these are very duplicative to things that we're talking about in other sections. And then just to finally pick up on Councillor Hopkins's point, I was struck when I was looking at the comparison to other fire services, just the range that exists. And whilst we're by no means an outlier in a negative sense, we're also by no means a better performer. And so I think it would be helpful just to try and understand where there are services that are achieving, closer to gender pay parity. Is there something they're doing that we could learn from? It might be by dint of senior team representation or whatever, but there might also be some drivers, and we shouldn't assume that it's simply that. And I think I understand that it's a year behind, because I assume you need to collate the data once it's all been reported, etc. Could we just have an action to potentially, when you've had a chance to capture the data from the 2022 reporting from other fire authorities, we bring that back earlier just so we can look at how we settle in the 2022 pay comparison, because again, if there are actions we feel we need to take as a result, I think that'd be really, really helpful. I don't know if you want to respond to any of that, because that was more a long speech than anything, but.
Just on the point of the comparison to other fire and rescue services, there is a disparity in how people collect the information. We use is it the LGA guidance?
Yes, we look at LGA, ACAS and Government Qualities Office guidance, so we just consider best practice. That's the method that we use.
But there are other methods that are used that we didn't realise until we started to pick through those. And if we were to adopt other methods, it would skew the numbers again. But we've just gone by best practice.
Well, if I could, Chairman, if I could just come back in, then maybe we should be lobbying to central government or whatever to actually get a directive coming down from the centre. These it's the point I was trying to make earlier, wasn't it? I knew the figures were there, but there was no sort of, for a better way of looking at it, league table to say, okay, we're second in regards to this, but we're 54th in. No, I don't know. In regards to something else, and now I understand it is because there's a disparity in the way things are. So I think perhaps the Chief Fire Officers Association or whatever should be lobbying the Home Office to send a directive down to say these figures have to be gathered in a particular way, using one methodology and one methodology only.
I can pick that up if you want to. I can write to the Home Office. It may also be worth writing to HICFRS.
Yeah,
in terms of. Because actually, in terms of their data sets, etc., it might be worth looking at that as well.
Yeah. I mean, I think the crucial thing here is it's not the data that matters; it's what we do with the data and what it's telling us to do with the pay reporting. So I think it's right that we stick with best practice. I mean, I think there are also some legal requirements about how you assess the data, which I assume they're still meeting. But it is important we focus on the actions and what we need to do. Good. So we're being asked to. That the content of the Gender Pay Gap Report 2022 is noted and approved submission to the government's website as per reporting requirements we have to approve. Thank you. Well done on the work on it.
Okay.
That moves us to item number 8, performance management report. I won't say anything on it. I'll just hand over to Craig. You carry on.
Good morning, members. The key performance measure report provides us with a platform to quickly understand how we're performing across the service. It also enables us to highlight certain measures to you, our members, and also to our staff. As in previous quarters, we've tried to provide appropriate context to help understand some of those figures. Furthermore, we've chosen to provide extra details in relation to our whole-time firefighter numbers, as this impacts many of those response measures detailed within the report. I would just like to remind members that the report being presented today details the services position at the end of December 2022, and that some of the figures shown are still influenced by the summer pressures of 2022. I appreciate a lot of information there, so there's probably a lot of questions. Rather than me rabbit on, and just open it up and answering questions that anyone has.
Okay, I'll kick off if I may, just with a couple of questions. So could we please get an update on where we are on whole time establishment numbers?
Yep.
Let's do that one first.
So obviously this is from December. So at the moment we are. Do you want me to take this?
Yeah, if you want. I've got the numbers in front of me. Yeah.
Yeah. So we have an establishment of 300. We're currently sat at 289. That is broken down between what we call back office and on the pumps. On the pumps we are 10 short, and then back office we're 1 short. So we're 11 short of where we need to be. That was at the beginning of March. So.
Yeah, and just on that, we've got a transferee course coming in June. The application process is closed now. If we do fill that course, depending on levers, we will be just at about 300. But then we've got another course in September and then October. So that should take us into the positive above that. So we're as Craig said, we're 11 short at the moment based upon our numbers today.
And just remind me, so I might have got this number wrong, but I very rarely get numbers wrong, I hate. So I think that's a growth on a start at the beginning of the municipal years, that's the best way of describing it, of 265. So we're going from 265 to 289 over the year. Is that right? Yeah, which is a good growth. I know we're slightly short of the 300, but as long as we remain on track, I think it's a really good.
Worth noting that we did lose more to London this year than we've ever lost in the other year.
So good.
Did you want an update on kind of applications? Because so for transferees, as kind of Mick said, we had 44 applications for transferees. So that closed on the 19th. The team are going through that process. The whole time applications close on the 26th of March. So we have 90 applications to date with 162 pending.
Excellent. Very good progress. Next one, fire and wellness visits. So we had a commitment that we would be hitting the run rate on fire and wellness visits coming out of April. And obviously the report is showing on page 97 that in December we were at 176, which feels quite a way off that 300% update on the current run rate.
Right, so again, that's accurate, but if you want January, February, March's figures, I can give you those.
I
So
think
January, we were 5 short, so we were 295 in January. February, we actually exceeded, so we're 326 for February, and already in March, we're at 269. So
Excellent.
that it's kind of where we planned to be. We said we were going to struggle for the first few months due to resource, but we're definitely getting back there.
That's excellent. It's good news on the progress. Thank you. And then just, I suppose that just one that obviously stands out at the beginning is the attendance time, which we're showing at red. I just welcome a bit more of a overview about what we think is going on there and what assurance members can get. We're going to get that response time to target. Best place to cover that.
Yes, there's a lot of things that factor in attendance times. Obviously our call time numbers, you'll see that that's impacted a lot of areas. So our pump availability, for example, isn't where we would hope it'd be. That impacts our attendance times. The summer pressures, we had obviously a lot of incidents going on that put a massive strain on our response times did. They went up because of that, and because of the high volume of numbers, that obviously the average then impacts that across the whole year. So there's a number of things. The one thing I would say is the attendance times that we mainly focus on, so the AGF attendance time, things like that, they've generally stayed okay. It's just the other the people stuck in lifts and things like that tend to bring us down a bit. So the key ones we're concerned with, or not too worried at the moment, and you should see the attendance time come back in Q4 because our whole time establishment is up, so our pumps are available, and we're already seeing the benefits of that on the attendance times. Okay. So yeah, it's a mix. It was just a mixture of a lot of things coming together.
Correct. Anything on that, Adrian?
No,
Okay. Thank you very much. Great, thank you, Councillor Dyson.
Just to follow up, I've got two questions. One is just to follow up, I was going to ask about attendance times. And I think the key thing was in the report you said, and I was trying to find it again, that one of the issues on attendance times was the fact that it was much more urban environments and actually where the location of our fire stations weren't best placed.
I know.
No, it says, where does it say? It says, location of the incidents during hot spells tend to be located away from built up locations, consequently further from stations. Sorry, I had it backwards the other way around. And I just wonder how that's feeding into our other review in terms of us thinking about where we're going with stations. And I think that's a really important consideration for us to pick up on that side. The one I was really worried about was this great place to work. I mean, this whole agenda is about what it's like being a gender, looking at it from various different culture, genders, but I wonder if you could go into a little bit more detail about why that seems to be going backwards from amber and red. On page 89.
I'll pick up station locations first.
Yeah.
So our stations are generally in the best places they could be. They're in the built-up areas where most of the incidents occur, and with the most incidents that involve life risk. So when it comes to the summers, yes, we have a lot of incidents. Yes, they're in the open fields, but there's less life risk. They do take us long to get to, and generally consume more resource, which means the next incident takes us long to get to. So for our demands, our stations are in the right location. So that I'll put in mind is straight away. That being said, we are about to write our new CRMP, which will look at resilience, how we cope with those peaks during the summer events or the flooding, and where maybe we move our resources. That will be picked up in that. With regards to the great place to work, Oh, so yeah, so the main part was the establishment, so that impacted a lot of it. So, but is there any specific, because there are other areas, but a lot of the Great Place to Work metrics
I
are
don't
annual.
understand what that means, actual versus establishment.
So, our establishment is how many firefighters we have budget for, and our actual is how many we've currently got employed. So at the time, when that was written, we had 268 firefighters compared to the 300 we had the budget for.
Oh, okay, I see it, okay.
So-
But we're still red on things like employee engagement, appraisal completion, mandatory e-learning, grievance and discipline. Reportable injuries. And then we're amber on attacks on members of staff. Equipment damage, we're still red. So that whole page on 92 seems quite concerning when we're talking about trying to recruit more people, retain them for longer. These are all things that would impact that.
So, I can, do you want to pass it?
I'll just pick up on employee engagement. We got the budget signed off to do a more frequent survey. So at the moment that is related to 2022. So we're trying to get a pulse survey done in the next couple of months that will give us a better indication of whether that still stands as a measure of how people feel. In terms of appraisal completion, the team have been working hard to go out and I guess re-educate people why appraisals are important. And that actually it's not just about the appraisal at the end of the year, it's all those conversations that you have throughout the year. And that's just a nice summary of everything you've done over the year. So the hope is that as we move into the 22-23 period and the year appraisals are happening right now, that number will see move up. There's also work going on our maintenance of competencies and understanding how we report on those. Often our staff are maintaining their competencies and we now have no issue with that. Just not ticking on the heat packages we go and take our reporting from. So we're trying to encourage them to say, if you've done the exercise, capture it on the system, that helps with reporting. And I don't know if there's anything else you wanted to add.
Probably covered it.
Yeah, we will pick up with the health and safety team around some of the other members of health and safety to make sure we've got some commentary for the far.
Okay, thank you. Catherine Walsh.
Thank you, Chairman. Following on Councillor Darlington's point about resources being in the right places, and we also talked about new equipment for dealing with some of the new challenges we face, particularly field fires. And I wonder if the Deputy Chief can update us on where we're at with those plans for this year.
Yeah, of course. So with regards to the learns from the summer pressures we faced last year, we've put some work in train now in the sort of the short term with a longer term view through the CRMP as well. So what we've done is we've engaged with some of our neighbours, if you like, who have suffered issues in the past. So Surrey, for instance, who have had a peer review done by Northumberland to lead on wildfire for the National Fire Chiefs Council. And they've invited us down and we've been on some of their training courses so that we've got some tactical advisors trained, and we've also been adapting some vehicles as well. And what we're also going to be doing is looking at areas where we know we have issues around wildfire and how we can prepare better for those. And I've got tomorrow actually, I sit on the Local Resilience Forum Executive Committee, and I've got a big agenda piece on that, because one of the things that was highlighted during the summer as well was around sites of national infrastructure and how well they are protected from fire or not. Because following, I think it was the 2004 floodings in Gloucestershire, that legislation was brought forward around protecting sites of critical national infrastructure from flood. But there's nothing around wildfire. And the summer before last, a couple of the airwave masts were almost lost up in Winter Hill, up in Lancashire. So I'm pushing through a Local Resilience Forum, that community engagement piece and prevention piece around vegetation management, land management, and about how we can engage better with the farming community as well, understanding what they're growing differently now and how that impacts on the built environment. Because we've learned a lot of lessons from London Fire Brigade as well, with what happened in Dagenham and Wellington, and how they, in their own words, were not as prepared as they would have liked to have been from a wildfire perspective, with that interface between kind of the countryside and the concrete, if you like. So we're doing an awful lot of work learning from others who have been through different and similar experiences, and adapting our fleet as well. And that will lead into our fleet strategy, property strategy, and the CRMP as we move forward, with potentially, utilising different bits of estate for different bits of equipment for when we do get those pressures. Because one thing we learned was the weather forecasting was spot on, and we could actually predict where and when those fires were going to happen, and how we gear up for that. That feeds into the resilience piece we spoke about earlier. So just to give you some comfort, there's a lot of work going on in that area, but not being complacent that we can't take the eye off of, you know, the flooding elements and all the other bits that come with it as well. But we're using what we learned from the floods as well to push in towards the wildfire.
Just picking up on that as well, if I mean, the question about in terms of the location of fire stations, obviously the more urban areas is where the life risk is, but actually our property footprint, if you look at on-call and hold time stations, is in a pretty good place. And part of the CRMP process will consider how we use our property footprint in terms of our on-call stations, our hold time stations as well, in terms of moving resources around when we have them predictions. So actually keeping the property that we've got, but thinking about different ways and different appliances at different times in different areas. And I think that's going to be one of the cornerstones of the next CRMP, is about understanding what we've got and how we can use that in a better way.
It's also worth saying, actually, at the annual fire conference, we had I describe it as a very detailed, thorough presentation from a wildfire expert from Spain. That at some point we should ask the chief fire officer to present to the authority to take us through.
In Spanish.
The charts were of another order of magnitude. So I've got Councillor Hopkins next.
Yes, thank you, Chairman. I was just going to comment. It's not that many years ago that when there would have been somebody sat just from a member of the press, and the dangers of any reporting data in this sense that it's, you know, it's traffic light system, is you see a line that says availability, hold time, red. And that could very quickly be spun into this is the fire service's equivalent of the ambulance service. And if there's a fire in my street, there won't be a whole time fire service response to it because, for whatever reason. I wonder if in the notes underneath, I know the notes are quite helpful, but they refer often to a very specific line. For example, the notes under response are for R205. I wonder if under something which is like R201, availability, of R202, if a note could be put in at that point, just to give a little bit of a description as to quite what that actually means, because it appears at first sight to be very alarming, and I rather suspect it is. So reassure me.
Yeah, so I think it's a well-made point, actually. I mean, in terms of our response times, just want to update on how we perform versus the national expectation on average.
So generally, we're normally much better than that. And again, that would normally count in a separate report. This is more of a reactional report, so we can look at it when those exceptions come in, we can react. So
yeah, I think it's a well-made point. You know, part of what we're trying to do with this performance management report is set ambitious targets for the service and for the authority, but you're right that we need to make sure that doesn't lead to misconception about the performance. So very well pointed. Councillor Hall, yes, not good. That's fine. Don't worry. That's what they call live feedback from my chair. Councillor Hall.
Thank you, Chairman. Well, I just wanted to highlight a good positive piece on page 101. The fire safety audits completed. I mean, it's a critical part of what we do, making sure that the buildings, you know, are safe, or, you know, we know about particular buildings, and that firefighters have got information should they need to go into a building prior, you know, to any disaster. But just wanted to ask something on page 97, the fire and wellness visits. We're well down on those ones. I just wondered.
That was the question I asked earlier, where we're now at the run rate. 295 for Jan, 326 for Feb, and 269 for March.
Okay, yeah.
Great. Councillor Christensen.
Really naive question, I suspect, but I don't know the answers I'm going to ask it. Just coming back to, I take the point sort of made about response time. The amount we're missing it by is at the moment about 45 seconds. What does that actually mean in practice? Because to me, that doesn't sound like a lot on a 8-minute response time. So,
do you want me to say? Yeah, I'm happy to say that. Yeah, the thing is, because we set ourselves quite a challenging target on that, 45 seconds means that we're not hitting our target. What that means in reality, it depends, because they're average attendance times as well. So 45 seconds in 1 in a million incidents is a long time. 45 seconds on that, you know, generally isn't a particularly long time. It can, on some occasions, make a slight difference between that first intervention. But from, as crazy, our attendance times on the whole are very, very good, and the public, receive a very, very good service and a quick service in that respect. But in my experience of 30-something years now, I know I don't look it, but it's that 45 seconds, in my experience, has not made an awful lot of difference over the broad scheme of things.
Thank you. I mean, I like having high standards,
Yeah.
but it's also important to keep the
Oh,
reality.
yeah, absolutely. It keeps us
Yeah.
pushing towards that standard.
As I said, yeah, if it's all red, we all kind of go, oh my God, but actually in practice,
Yeah.
what does it mean? Thank you.
And it's worth saying, I think in the last HMI report, that the response times were singled out as good. So yeah, so it is important we don't lose sight of that. Sorry, just one final question, because I missed it in my list. The environment and carbon emissions targets, can we just have an update on when we can expect those to be populated?
Yeah, we're hoping to get those ready for quarter one of next year.
Right, okay, thank you. So being asked to note the report, happy to do so.
Sorry, just one other thing.
Oh, sorry.
Sorry. It's just to say, this is obviously our first year of doing this report in this level of detail. We are going to do a review in prep for 23-24. So if there's any feedback on measures you would like to see added or removed or updated with extra text, then please let us know, and we'll start to incorporate that into the 23-24.
Good, thank you. And I think I put on record my personal view, I hope it's shared by the members. This report has been excellent for improving our ability to scrutinise the service. So really appreciate the work. Thank you very much, officers. So happy to note the report.
Agreed.
Thank you. Moves us on to agenda item number 9, the culture review. So we've covered the issues of culture and service at quite a lot of previous meetings with verbal updates, both following the London Fire Brigade report and other incidents. And we asked for a more formal update on progress to come to the executive, and I think we should take this to the full authority as well. It's worth saying that the Chief Foreign Officer and I, when we speak every week, this is the first thing we talk about each week. So it is of really significant importance both to the colleagues that we have that work in the service and making sure it's a great place to work, but also community confidence in service. So I think this is a really important agenda item. Appreciate huge amounts of work's gone into it as well. So I'm going to hand over to, I think, Anne first, and then Emily's going to do a presentation as well. So to Anne.
Thank you. Okay, so exploring our culture. Following the independent culture review of the London Fire Brigade and then subsequent news articles in South Wales, Dorset and Wiltshire, the service is reviewed what's in place for employees and what actions need to be taken. So our people strategy comprises of key areas that support cultural change, which help the service to better deliver its vision and strategic priorities. The objective is to ensure that the culture experienced by Buckinghamshire Fire and Rescue Service staff and public they come into contact with is in line with our values and our code of conduct. So all employees are aware of the expected behaviours, ensuring all employees are aware of the procedures, processes and support in place for them, and feel able to come forward with any discrimination or inappropriate behaviour concerns they've experienced or have witnessed. All employees are assured that they will be listened to and action taken as a result, and allegations are dealt with robustly. Excuse me. The actions have been captured in Appendix 1, and I'll go through that in a minute. Our current area of focus is to ensure our staff know how to raise an issue, including the whistleblowing process, and I will pass over to Emily at the end of my presentation to go through that with you. We continue to engage with Inspectorate, including providing them with our historic grievance disciplinary information and our work carried out on disclosure and barring in Appendix 2. Excuse me. So if I go to Appendix 2 first, that's the letter that we sent to the Inspectorate, and that details our response to on DBS. So I wasn't planning to go through that, but the main areas that I just wanted to draw attention to is that we are recommending all fire and rescue services adopt our approach to DBS checks. So we do enhanced checks for all operational members of staff. Weekly reports are run to check all our DBS checks are currently in date and any issues are highlighted and escalated. So basically, we are re-looking at our DBS procedure currently at the minute to make sure that it's correct. The team are making sure that they check all of the DBSs that need to take place. Employees are on an update service. We check it once a year. I think in the letter it said that we'd carried out 330 staff. So that was as at beginning of March. As of today, we're on 339. It's a rolling programme. So we're kind of ongoing with those. So that was just on the DBS. I wasn't planning to go through it in depth, but it was just to know the amount of work of the team and how seriously we take the DBS procedure. A quality impact assessment is in Appendix 3. Again, I wasn't planning to go through that, but I just felt it was important to include a full quality impact assessment to make sure that we have covered everything. And also it's a process that we will review as we carry on with the culture work. So if I can just take you to Appendix 1, and as I say, I'm not going to go through all of these areas, but I just would like to draw your attention to some of them. And some of them link into the quarterly performance that Craig's just presented as well. So the areas I wanted to draw your attention to, number 2, draft a communication to employees regarding the whistleblowing line. So that has been carried out. I have brought with me, and I can kind of share those later, some of the communications as well, so I can show you some of those. Deliver an overarching speak up campaign. So Emily's going to show us the presentation that she put together for the senior management team and also for the leadership group as well, and go through, as I say, that's just on the speak up campaign. Code of conduct, Faye has just gone through with you, and also the whistleblowing review went through O&A. There was external scrutiny on both of those by South East employers. And we've also spoken to the South East employers about if there are any allegations that come in that could they help us, could they support us, and they've said that they would. DBS I've already referred to, so I won't say any further on that one. And then we've carried out a review of previous allegations and grievances, conduct and outcome, and we've gone back to the inspection on that one. Basically what we did is we looked back on all the previous cases and scrutinised the decisions that were made there. Contact South East employees for support, as I say. There have been quite a lot of freedom of information requests that have been coming through. So we've made sure that we obviously complete those in the deadlines, and the Director of Legal has been having a look at those, because obviously we need to be careful kind of what we're sending over. It has quietened down a little bit on those, but there were quite a flurry on those over the last couple of months. We're also making sure that we put a reminder in place to employees of all the support and everything that's in place. So, for example, our welfare officer, our mental health support officers, firefighters charity, our employee assistance programme, and all the procedures and everything that we have in place. But we don't want to, we want to make sure that we do this on an ongoing basis, and make sure that everything is in place. The main part of this, the exploring our culture, is that people can feel comfortable to come forward and speak. So very well having everything in place, but if people aren't comfortable to come forward, so hence why Emily's looking at the speak up, so that we're trying to do as much as we can. Senior management team visibility across stations. So the senior management team go out and visit stations on a regular basis. So personally, when I go and sit at the mess table. I don't go with an agenda. I ask for kind of questions, and we just tend to discuss lots of things, which is like recruitment, culture, everything. So there's obviously been the employee engagement through the culture survey, as well as Anne-Marie said, we're planning to do more of those. So it's showing endorsement from the top management and foster a culture of speak up. I feel if I go to stations, people know who I am, and I can kind of talk to them. They're more likely to come and talk to myself or the team in regards to any concerns or anything that they have, either at that point or at another time, because it's all very well knowing the name, but you need to know the face to know that you can speak to that person. And then a few other areas. Myself and Anne-Marie are attending the NFCC Culture Conference on Monday and Tuesday. So we're learning from other fire and rescue services of what they've got in place. Is there anything else that we could be doing over and above what we've got here? regularly update Gary on everything that's happening. I think it's supposed to we definitely have a monthly one, but we're on the phone kind of all the time, aren't we? Just trying to tell him that everything's happening, so that I want to know that he's fully up to date. And then the last area that I just wanted to kind of look at really was the review of the training and education that's provided to employees at all levels. We've put currently in the training needs analysis, we've put in for face-to-face ED&I training for not only the ED&I group, but members of staff across the service as well. Because we are aware that we need to make sure that, you know, it's part of everybody's responsibility and link it into the ED&I. And I think that was everything I wanted to say on the, and I've run through them fairly quick, but I've got questions. And the last bit was really just to say the culture review has been discussed with the following groups. So senior management team, I think it would be fair to say it's been discussed at every meeting that we've had. So that's every Tuesday. The leadership group on the 9th of December, 26th of January and the 10th of March. Joint consultation forum. So every single meeting that we've had, and the ED&I group, of which kind of Jason and Gary are members of. So we've discussed that every meeting, and it's an agenda item, as if always make sure that area is covered. And we've certainly had some interesting conversations, haven't we, over the last few meetings. Meetings have taken place with female firefighters and also about welfare incidents, uniform concerns and facilities. So we've tried to make sure that, you know, we've consulted with as many people as possible, and that will be ongoing. And I think that was probably everything from me. If you've got any questions, I think you can take them. Just to say thank you to everybody who's really kind of helped put this report together. It's been really, you know, good to make sure that we've got all of that. Nothing's been missed. So just wanted to say thank you.
Good, thank you. Councillor Hall.
Thank you, Chairman. Well, I'd like to thank personally Anne and the team for all the work that has gone on over this. I mean, it's a huge amount of work, and it's very, very time consuming. And I'm actually encouraged by the robust nature of everybody looking into everything to make sure, you know, particularly with the background of what happened with London, to make sure that there's nothing in this service that we don't know about or that we should know about. So I think, you know, I'm very confident that the work the team is doing is going to pay dividends. The enhanced DBS checks and the update service, there is a cost to that, but I think it's worth paying that cost.
Thank you. Any other questions, comments? I've got a couple, but I'll let the members go first. Councillor,
Sorry,
Sorry,
I'll
Councillor
wait for
McLean. Sorry,
Emily to do hers.
sorry, Councillor McLean first, and then, oh yeah, we'll come back after you. Councillor McLean.
Thank you, Chairman. In terms of the DBS checking,
Mhm.
are you doing it all in-house? Or are you using an agency to help?
Yeah, so basically we use Buckinghamshire Council, so the team kind of goes an umbrella kind of organisation that we do. We have looked at doing it in lots of different ways, but that's most cost effective.
I'm just pass the comment because in my role as chair of the licensing committee at Milton Keynes Council, they're doing 6 monthly DBS checks, but they're outsourcing that to. It sounds like you already got that in hand, so thank you, Anne.
Yeah, so we used to do every 3 years,
Yeah.
but more recently we've been doing it every, I would say probably, I want to say like going back last 2 or 3 years, we've been doing it on the update service. So there's a few people, when I say there's 339 people that have had it, there's a few people that might be on maternity or secondments or various, but it's kind of a rolling programme, and we update on a regular basis.
Just to pick up on that, we are out of step with the rest of the fire and rescue service nationally on DBS checks in a positive way. We are one of the only ones in the country that does enhanced DBS checks. We sit on the national group, the national working group, which is currently taking place in terms of looking at DBS checks in the fire and rescue service. We are encouraging as much as we possibly can Home Office and the NFCC to adopt our way forward. I'm not sure that they're going to get there, if I'm honest. I've had conversations with HMIC FRS recently about how we do it and how they can. We've had a good conversation about how we together encourage other fire and rescue services to get to this place. Doesn't mean we catch everything, but it's just another level of checks isn't it? And that's the thing. So it's just worth noting that we are out of step with all the faculty services.
So I think the word I would use rather than out of step is an innovative bit of practice that you've had in the service for a while, and I think should be recognised. And I know when we spoke to HMI the other week, we made sure that was understood. Can I just, before we move on to the presentation, this is the toughest benchmark of action plan I've seen for a while, in that you appear to be rating things green for yourself only when you've completed them, and everything else is amber or red if it's not started. And I think that probably could lead to a slight misunderstanding about progress. So could I just encourage a blue for complete actions, green if the actions are on track to be completed in time and to the outcomes and standards that you expect, amber if it's off track, and then red if it's significantly off track. Just I think
That's fine.
fairer to yourselves on the work. And but final, just quick question: the code of conduct that we've just done, will that be wrapped in? I should have asked this on code of conduct, but it only occurred to me when I was just looking at it now. Is that going to be wrapped into a mandatory e-learning process in of itself, or how will colleagues' understanding of the code of conduct be embedded through e-learning or face-to-face learning?
I think we're going to look at lots of different ways of doing it so that we could make it into a heat package, like we have with lots of others. But it's about kind of going out and making sure that people really understand it. We could just publish it on the internet and leave it there, but actually a lot of people won't see that. So it's part of the kind of the going out to see operational members of staff and at headquarters. And it's not just that; it's everything else that kind of comes with it. So I think this is just the start of what we're trying to do.
Anne-Marie?
Yeah, just to build on that. At the moment, the focus of the marketing campaign that you're going to see in a minute is around whistleblowing. That's the first step in kind of working our way through some of those processes, some of those documents to really bring them to life for staff. So ultimately, we kind of want to get to a point where we'll then do a marketing campaign around code of conduct, or if we link it up to updating our values. Yeah, it's just a first step.
Great, thank you. Emily, over to you.
Thank you, and good morning still. Yes, good morning to everybody. I wanted to or ask to bring this presentation to the exec today after having presented it to our senior management team and on a leadership away day. I'm trying to show how marketing campaign planning methodologies can improve our internal communications in the way that we engage with our employees. The culture of the fire service obviously has been on the high agenda nationally and locally, and there's been many discussions that have already established with lots and lots of ideas floating around. A bit of self evaluation on how we currently tackle things. We tend to default to use the plan of firefighting. We respond to challenges. It's what we're good at, and it has served us really well in most circumstances. However, when we're looking to influence a cultural change, we need to shift our focus from what we do to how we do it. And that involves a holistic view to fully understand both internal and external influences. And really working collaboratively rather than silo. And I think the chairman's alluded to before, sometimes a lot of these reports and procedures and policies, we look at them in silo and we don't understand how they all link in the golden thread, as it were. Making sure we have that consistent top line, and that top line is delivered from our senior management team down to employees. So today I'd like to talk through our plans for launching a Speak Up campaign, which will form part of our efforts to improve our culture within the service. This kind of approach is something that I would encourage and like to adopt through most of our communications, and for example, the code of conduct for our values. We could adopt similar methodologies to ensure that our employees and staff are on board and invested and engaged with the whole process. The first thing, a great starting point is to get some background upon what is currently going on, and that's reviewing the situation not only internally but externally, what's going on now, what's gone previously. And all that can impact the way that we build our communications. And for example, when looking at considerations for Speak Up campaign, things like the London Culture Review, previous and bullying or banter campaigns that have happened? Are there any learnings from that? One thing that struck me when we were talking about what type of language we should be using in communications is that 52% of our workforce feel disengaged and ineffective, with 60% of those who complete the survey, culture survey, in 2022 believe poor performance isn't managed effectively. So if we have a large proportion of our workforce already slightly disengaged and not believing in our processes, perhaps, then we need to be making sure that we're putting the groundwork in to build that confidence back up before we go in with any potentially hard finger pointing, accusational messaging. So this is all really about taking people on a journey rather than just landing a procedure on someone's desk. Other factors that we consider London Culture Review, and we also looked at the outcomes from the London Culture Review that the London Fire Brigade have started to implement. This slide is an example of an external page on their website that talks about an external complaint service for staff, and it does publish some HR data. Something that I later on allude to as an option for us to adopt. Why wait until we have our own culture internal review to come up with some of these things that have been implemented? But it is something we need to be careful about, being such a small service, to ensure that we are not breaching any data privacy regulations on that. So that's in discussion at the moment. And something else was looking at what other services use in terms of a independent confidential line that is run by another supplier. And there's some suppliers there that we have in conversation with at the moment. To make sure we fully answering the problem, we need to really understand what our target audience barriers are. With any kind of marketing, it is good practice to do consultation to some degree. In this case, I took my research from the government websites to understand what information is readily available for people to read already. I also looked at other HR firms, blogs and newsletters and other whistleblowing line providers' websites to understand the most common barriers to whistleblowing. There are going to be many, but as an overview, I've listed some here. Lack of trust in the organisation systems is a big barrier. An answer to that could be to put clear procedures into place and publicise organisations' commitment to reporting. That kind of shows maybe where the London Fire Brigade have published their HR stats. Announcing the policy publicly will show our commitment and make employees feel secure and at ease when they come to reporting any misdoings. Something that I read, I haven't put any sort of reference to where I got it from, because I'm not entirely sure whether it's just a story or true, but I just felt like it resonated with me and I felt I wanted to share it. Was that one company in which an executive almost resigned rather than expose a sexual predator in the organisation. However, he was encouraged to share his story safely. The person was dismissed and executive was promoted. The result says to the whole company, who watched what was happening and that began to believe that change was possible. And that's the thing that I want to try to encourage us to do, is to start encouraging people to believe that change is possible. So that brings us on to something that we're calling Speak Up campaign, which its ultimate goal is to promote an open, transparent and safe working environment where employees feel safe and are positively encouraged to speak up against unacceptable behaviour. Part of building some content and communications is to look at what we've currently got in place. This just shows that we currently have our policies, procedures and guidance notes all currently arranged into themes. And when I look at creating actual words around this campaign, I need to potentially look at all these policies highlighted in blue to ensure that we are being consistent It also means that when someone is thinking about speaking up or would like some more information, these are the other policies and procedures and guidance notes that we may want to direct people to. So it's trying to make sure that we're not giving people information in silo, we're giving them access to all the information they need if they choose to look further, and it's easy for them to access. This was something, again, is quite standard in the marketing approach, is mapping out your touch points with your employees. This is a very, very basic version, something that I'd like to explore further with my colleagues in HR. But it just shows what process we feel people, well, what process people would go through if they were to speak up, and are any gaps or areas for opportunity to improve. And I've pulled a few out there, things like what is an acceptable behaviour, simplifying our values visually. Maybe there's been some talking around self-reflection tools. How do people identify if something is something to escalate or not? And then the point about introducing a new speak up line that's not solely for whistleblowing, and it gives people more opportunity for staff to raise concerns. So all those ideas you can easily see in that mapping out process. I was being a creative, go to the Google Engine and have a look at what other people are doing, because I think Councillor Hopkins said earlier, if someone's doing it really well, then we should probably take note and learn from that. If not, copy it. I'm no adverse to copying things.
Promote her immediately.
So this is kind of a view of what's going on out there already. Also equally as important as what you do like is what you don't like, because sometimes you don't know what you want, but you know what you don't want. So at the bottom corner there, when it comes to whistleblowing, we really want to avoid that feeling that people are being targeted, and that they're going against their colleagues, that they potentially are stabbing people, they're going to get stabbed in the back for doing so. One visual that really stood out and we discussed quite a lot was the Lloyd's one, the big blue one. We stand for integrity, respect and inclusion, always speaking up. It was just so simple, clean. It really outlines what our value, what their values were, and what they're asking people to do, speak up against unacceptable behaviour. So that kind of concludes kind of the researching, my thought process when building these types of campaigns. We now lead on to the interesting stuff is, okay, what actually are we going to do? It brings all that previous work together. It's where the key messages and target audiences fleshed out. Ideas start to form along with the resources needed, timings, actions, owners. You'll notice that the words taken from the researchers form part of the objectives and key messaging. Also ideas from the culture review outcome feature in the comms plan, such as publishing HR content onto websites. I wasn't planning to go through the individual and the weeds of it all. If you've got any questions on anything in particular, then I'm happy to take those. But hopefully agree that it demonstrates how we are trying to move from just publishing a policy or procedure, the what, and move towards ways in which we can market changes to employees, and that's the how. What next? I hear you ask. I'm working with key stakeholders to come up with branding for the campaign, which includes a top line. So far, it looks a little something like this. We're in early stages, nothing's been signed off. We are going to, we looked at the code of ethics and our values, and we felt those three words in the poster before actually really do stand for us as well. So integrity, respect and inclusion. Next step is to look at the budgets, designing content, creating assets and delivery dates. It's all still relatively new way of working for us. We'll get quicker and smarter as we learn. Marketing is all about test and learn. You never get anything right the first time. I wouldn't expect this to land 100%. It's not a quick fix project. My aim is for employees to start to see communications by the end of April and to continue to build momentum throughout the year. Thank you.
Thank you. That was excellent, Emily. Comments, questions? Councillor Walsh.
Thank you, Chairman. Yeah, Emily, I think this is an excellent piece of work. I think it's really moving forward. The only small thing I noticed is that we talked about the whistleblowing confidential line being an 0844. I think following an O&A meeting, that's now an 0800 number. 15. So let's make sure that we don't spend money printing with the wrong telephone.
Yes, sure.
That's really good.
Good, thank you. Councillor Darlington.
I agree, Emily. I think you've done a superb piece of work here, and I think one of the most powerful slides on there is the barriers to whistleblowing. And I think that's really important to understand. And when we talk about culture, you know, that's really what we're talking about, is bringing down those barriers to reporting. And so I think one of the key things is this establishment of the anti-retaliation policy. But also what happens in a complaint situation? Who gets moved off site? Does anybody get moved? Is it the complainant or the person being complained about? You know, and all those sorts of things really change how people will behave in this environment. And I think the other thing just to note, as I absolutely fully endorse everything you're doing, but we've also got to recognise we just focus on whistleblowing. We're talking about dealing with a problem that's already happened and not dealing with preventing the problem. And culture for me, as we've talked about before, is very much about preventing it from happening in the first place, and empowering individuals not to have to go through formal systems, but to actually just be able to check their colleagues, which is really the environment I think we all want to create. And I just wanted to share with the board, though I know Anne and Anne-Marie will know, we had a really good meeting about white ribbon and how we establish that, because this is a bit of the stick, right? But where's the carrot? Where's the positive, open demonstration of that change of culture that empowers people to say to their colleagues, we just don't do that here. That's not the way we behave. And then creates that environment for people from different ethnicities or women to have that confidence that their colleagues have their backs, or different sexualities. And so it was a really, really positive meeting. And I just want to say a huge thank you to the HR team, the team that are leading on, the EDI team, I believe, are leading on it. And just want to make sure it's properly integrated into everything the HR team are doing. And just to thank Jason once again for his leadership on the white ribbon stuff, because we're absolutely right to do all of the stuff, the code of conduct, the whistleblowing, everything. But they're all, when we failed, when an incident's already happened, and actually we've got to combine it with those, and then hopefully with those actions that make it a positive place, do the carrot and stick.
Great, thank you. Councillor McLean.
Thank you, Chair. The introductory part of your presentation, thank you very much for it, and thank you for my colleague's interjection. I agree, without plagiarising. You mentioned in the internal bit the 60% of those who completed the survey believing poor performance isn't managed effectively. The 60%, I've no idea whether that's 60% of 10 people or 60% of 100 people. And ask the question of Mick and Jason, is it verifiable that people aren't being effectively managed in terms of poor performance? So the metrics are a bit of outcome.
I don't have the volume, the number of people that 60% represents on hand, but I can get it to you. It's not a problem.
It's about 350 staff responses.
350. Did a quick bit of maths, 180 odd who said it performance wasn't being managed effectively. Any?
Yeah, I can talk about that actually. The issue is in terms of that is getting people to speak up. We've gone through this, and Emily has mentioned this a number of times actually in the authority meeting, and she's quite right to do it, because you can have all the systems, policies, and procedures in place as you wish, and actually we can do all of these great things, etc. But we are still in a position as a sector in the fire and rescue service where people have to leave the organisation to then give feedback about their colleagues. I've just been reflecting on that. I anticipate that there will be other fire and rescue services, possibly this week or next week, that'll be in the news nationally or locally in terms of where cases have not been managed or people have been ignored, etc., and had to leave the organisation. If you look at their, for example, their inspection reports, they're good, they're outstanding in all of the policies and procedures they've got in place. But this campaign about poor performance, about speaking up, is about encouraging as many people as we possibly can to say that this is what's happened to me, this is not acceptable, and I want you to do something about it. And we will take action on the back of that. In terms of the 60% of the 350, they're all anonymous. That's the other thing to remember about all of our culture survey and all of them pieces. We do get a good feedback in terms of our culture survey and good feedback from our staff. And I think that's mostly because it's anonymous. On the other hand, because it's anonymous, people don't feel able to sort of speak up. When I go around watches and I go around other departments, etc., people, it's very, very rare for people to take me aside and say, this is what's happening or that's what's happening. But they're happy to do it in a culture report, and I would encourage them to do it. The next step is encouraging others to come forward. One thing is that I'm certain of, though, is if there are issues, we will deal with them. And I know that people watch these, believe it or not, the executive committees and fire authorities. And I would encourage any members of staff who have issues, who haven't declared, to come forward, and we will deal with it. We will deal with it. The final point I would make is that I'm not complacent. We have a review. We review the grievances. We review disciplines on a regular basis. We do all of them things. However, there may still be issues within our service that we just don't know about. And I can't give any assurances that they're not. But what I can say is we do enhanced DBS checks. We review grievances. We review disciplines on a regular basis. We do take action when it comes forward. The next step in terms of changing our culture is about the bystanders, is about everybody in the organisation saying exactly what you're doing is wrong. I'm going to stand by you, and we're going to get this fixed. And we're not there yet. So they're the next. That's the next stages of our journey, and hopefully the work that Emily and the team are doing will encourage people as much as we possibly can to take that extra step, because that's what we want for the future.
Thank you. Craig, did you want to come in on this?
Yeah, I was going to recommend a little bit of caution when we say we don't do a bad performance. It doesn't necessarily mean bad behaviour. So they might be acting completely professionally, just their level of performance within their role might not be. So just please don't, the two are completely aligned. That's the only thing I would say is important.
Yeah, so I agree with that. I suppose the only point I would make is that in my experience, where cultures allow poor performance to be unaddressed, it's the same cultures where poor behaviours are unaddressed as well. And I think we need to view them as similar things. But yeah, the distinctions understood.
Can I just thank both the officers, or the three officers, for their comments? I thought very full response to my question. Thank you, Chair.
Good, thank you. Councillor Christensen.
I'm just, how are we going to measure this? What's good look like? Appreciate it's still a work in progress, but it's an interesting conflict that if we succeed in getting people to speak up and report problems, then we've got a culture problem. So do we measure this through the culture survey, or I'm just not quite, yeah.
That'll be part of the next step, which we go through and see what are these ideas we're going to take forward, and then they will have measures set against them. Some will be tangible, figure based. Some won't be tangible. Some will be based upon the culture survey results. Some will be how many people have read articles. We can track things like that. How many click-throughs we've got on things. They're the tangible stuff. And other stuff is going to be through feedback. And the SMT going to the stations and getting the sense of what is going on is going to be one part of that.
Chief Barnes.
Just to pick up on that, there are the issue is how do you measure it? It's a really difficult one. In fact, it's practically impossible. If you are a member of staff, there are a number of ways. You can look at whistleblowing. You can identify it to your line manager. You can go, there's a strong union presence within the fire and rescue service. You can highlight issues in terms of poor behaviour or bad behaviour of your colleagues to your union rep. You can go to senior management. You can even respond confidentially to the culture survey, and you can respond confidentially to the inspectorate. The issue that we've got is that people leave the organisation of the fire and rescue service before they will do any of them things. That's the reality. And I think it's something the inspector will grapple with like I said, if you look at, there's a number of occasions where there's things that have been made public, and this isn't a criticism of the inspector, because they work very, very hard to uncover these sorts of things. But you look at inspection reports, and there are inspection reports where services have got good, outstanding, good for people, elements on measurements, but that's not stopped some of the behaviours, and the people who've identified their behaviours have left the organisation.
Councillor
Sorry,
Hopkins.
Chairman, can I just?
Oh, sorry, Chris, sorry.
So just, I suppose as a point of reference in my day job, we have a KPI for a minimum number of complaints we're looking to generate. And if we don't get those number of complaints, that triggers some more work to be done to understand why, which sounds completely barking mad, but that's the way we do it.
No, I think it's again important. But we've talked before about the fact that issues aren't being raised shouldn't give comfort. What we need to be doing is looking at other data points to say, are there issues, which we talked about turnover, we've talked about where appraisals aren't happening, all those sorts of things should be lead indicators there are issues. So I think that's well, it's on the same point, Anne-Marie.
Yeah, we had the same conversation around grievance disciplines. You're like, which is better, lower or high? So we put them in there. I think there might be something about a measure for 24-25 as whistleblowing.
Yeah.
As a measure, and we haven't looked at that.
Good. Councillor Hopkins.
Thank you, Chair. I mean, a good deal of what I was going to raise and say has been raised by others and responded to by the Chief Fire Officer, which I think highlights just what a complex. I think this is the most difficult issue we're facing at the moment. Changing culture in any organisation of any size is massively challenging, and I really appreciated your presentation. I think it's first class, so well done for that, and I'm glad we got you on board on this. The thing moving forward, I think, is we must beware political correctness and tick boxing, if you know what I mean. Well, but and I'm not underplaying this. We mustn't say, "Oh, we've done this and we produced this policy." We've really got to ingrain this into the authority. And I haven't got an answer for that, how you do that. And you can't do it quickly, but it does have to be absolutely ingrained. It has to become second nature, to the point where we're not talking about it anymore, because you don't need to talk about it anymore, because it is the nature and the culture within the fire authority and beyond. So I think that's the most challenging thing. As a slight word of caution, we have to also guard against using this changing culture as an excuse for someone looking to take revenge or to have a grievance against someone who may well be be so careful with it in this day. Someone who may mistake management for bullying or whatever, or who may mistake a lack of a promotion for another reason, and that is sort of like the counter to this. We have to move down this route. Because it's absolutely right and proper, but we just have to be aware of that counter culture as well that could exist. But well done. This is really great.
Thank you, Councillor Darlington.
Just got to react to Councillor Hopkins first.
Oh dear. You reacted last week.
I don't know if you were able to look around the room at the faces of the women and anybody from BME background when you were saying that. That is an excuse, and I'm just going to be blunt. That is an excuse that we have heard over and over and over again. It'll be used for revenge, it will be used for this, it'll be used for that.
Yeah.
The reality is we have very robust systems to try and abuse it that way. But it's that kind of language, those kinds of speeches that allow people that make people who may be on the receiving end of bullying, harassment, or anything like that feel that they won't get a good hearing, I'm afraid. And so we've got to be really careful. This is not about being woke. This is not about being, whatever other, PC, whatever other things that people want to put on, which now means that basically we're being snowflakes. It is about creating an environment of equality. It's about creating an environment that's safe, that everybody's treated as equals, and that they're not at all picked on for characteristics of which they have no control: their religion, their ethnicity, their gender, their sexuality. So I'm sorry, and I'll get off my soapbox now, but it really, unfortunately, too many times that kind of intervention leads to a lack of action or a lack of taking it seriously. The one I wanted to pick up on, sorry, going back to the point where I raised my hand up for, was the point that Jason was making. Too many people aren't reporting it when they're in service and they're waiting until they leave. And there'll be even more people who will be leaving and thinking, well, I'm out of there. I'm not even gonna bother making a big deal out of it now because I've got myself free. And so one of the long-term impacts that we should see about getting this right is our retention figures. Right, people that aren't leaving because of it. And there's something so we can put in things around exit interviews and try and get people to talk about it then. But the reality is if we get this right, people will want to work with us and they'll want to work with us for longer. And so I think if we're looking for metrics, it's not going to be a metric about next year, but those long-term metrics, retention and recruitment is part of that, I think, and we should be looking and considering those. Alongside, we will get an increase in whistleblowing, hopefully, that's what we want, right? We shouldn't be looking at that as, oh my goodness, this problem's just appeared. I think it's just, as Jason said, we're understanding the problem and creating the environment where people can talk about it, and that's what we want to happen.
Okay, thank you. I'm going to bring this to a close. So the first thing I should say is thank you for the work. I hope that you have sensed from all of the members present the strong support from us for what you're trying to do and the importance of it. And I think my ask of the senior management team is be demanding of what you need from the fire authority members to support you in what you're trying to do. Don't feel this is a task that you're doing on your own. We've talked before about both Jason and I in some of the verbal updates about it's important that we're neither complacent about the culture nor defensive about it. And I think that's been hopefully reflected in the discussion today. I think we all need to accept it is complex. It's actually really simple in its purest sense, which is we want a culture where people feel safe, able to speak up, but actually getting there from the start point is complex. And that's why I think it is a mix of the work you're doing on enabling people to feel it's safe to speak up, together with all of the other work that's been going on from equality and diversity and other things that we've covered today. So again, I think we all need to be recognising of the fact that journey is a hard one. But I think that's where Councillor Christensen's point is really important that we don't lose, which is that to understand whether we're making progress, we need to know how that progress is going to be measured. And so I think there are some good targets that we can be looking at. Retention is a good example, and there are many others. You know, the things that flow from the gender pay gap reporting around diversity in our colleague population, etc. So again, I just encourage the senior management team to be really thinking about there are some good outcomes that are outlined in the plan in terms of statements of intent. I think what we need to do is make sure there are some clear targets as well that we can track progress against. But thank you for the work, and as I say, hopefully you've got a sense of strong support from us. So we're being asked to note the work to date and the planned work in respect of exploring our culture. We're happy to do so.
Great.
Thank you. Okay, that moves us on to agenda item number 10, which is exclusion of the public and press. To consider excluding the public and press representatives from the meeting by virtue of paragraph 1 of part 1 of Schedule 12A of the Local Government Act 1972, as the report contains information relating to any individual, and paragraph 3 of part 1 of Schedule 12A of the Local Government Act 1972, as the report contains information relating to the financial or business affairs of a person, including the authority. And on these grounds, it's considered the need to keep information exempt outweighs the public interest in disclosing the information. Are members happy to agree with that? Great. Thank you. Thank you.